Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast. I'm Gemma Creagh and I'm chatting with filmmaker Fergus Dowd and former Debenhams worker Carol Ann Bridgeman about their timely film 406 Days. Thank you so much for chatting with us. I just want to go into it and first up ask how the pair of ye met and how, Fergus, actually, how did you decide to pick this as a topic?
Well, I suppose how it came about is myself and Sue O'Connell, we wrote a book called Tales from the Debenhams Picket Line about the story. So we had interviewed the workers for the book. The book did very well. It sold out 2 print runs. That was November 2021. And so the idea of the film really came, it was actually myself and Carol Ann were chatting one night because the book had done so well. We were just saying, God, it'd be amazing if we could do a film on this story, you know. And I'm actually an IT systems analyst by trade, so this was my first ever time to be involved in a film.
Wow.
Yeah, so so I sort of had to rack my brains and say, right, well, who do I know in the film world? So this was January 2022, so this is January last year, and I actually I'd worked previously on a project about an Irishman called Patrick O'Connell who saved FC Barcelona during the Spanish Civil War. And I contacted a guy called Cormac Hardigan who had done the John Giles documentary for RTE, just to sort of high level, just to say, look, we haven't, you know, with this book is done quite well, and we're interested in doing a film project. And would he suggest anybody, or you know, directors, or you know, the type of people in the Dublin locality? And we sort of chatted for about 20 minutes, and he just mentioned there's a chap called Joe Lee who and Joe had produced directed the film Fortune's Wheel, which was about a lion tamer in Dublin in the 1950s. A lion escaped, and he'd also worked on the story, a film about the Moore Street traders, women's workers. So he had Joe's number. He gave me Joe's number. I'd never spoken to Joe before. We'd never met. So I just rang Joe out of the blue February last year, went into Buswell's Hotel, had a coffee, and decided we'd do this film. So that's sort of how it came about. But we had to move very quickly because two main things was that obviously the story was still raw in the people's heads, in the workers' heads. And the other thing was that, you know, if you watch the film, you'll notice the film is different. It's a different type of film. We didn't use a studio. We actually filmed inside the empty buildings. So we had to get permission to do that. So I think at this stage, I probably know every property management company in Ireland trying to get into these buildings, but we managed it. So as I say, they were the key sort of two things, but that's sort of how it came about.
Because it's very haunting, the interviews that you do, because you can get that kind of echo in the background and you see that it's like this kind of empty husk of this building, and I think it's very sort of powerful, like you know, and you think in so many ways it's that this space has been really cleared out.
Yeah, it was extremely eerie when we went in. I mean, you know, the building hadn't been. We went in last March, so like it was empty for nearly a year because or nearly 2 years actually, because COVID would have started March 2020. So yeah, it was extremely. I mean, it was just ourselves, the people we were interviewing, and a security man, you know, rambling around. So.
And God, Carol, how do you feel now watching this again, and now that it has another life? So I presume when the book came out, it kind of brings everything up, because I know myself, I was made redundant very suddenly, and there's a grief to it, because people don't appreciate, like, you know, these are your friends, this is the job you've dedicated your life to, that your friends are around, and people go, oh, like, it's only a job, and you're like, actually, it's everything. And then when it's kind of taken away, there's grief. Like I remember being personally really hurt by that, and devastated in the moment, because it's such a shock. And then to have everyone renege everything on you that they had promised you in that instance, and deliver you nothing. And I know as well, it can be a while before the money comes through then. And then to have the powers that be facilitate everything. Like,
I mean, the process, like you said, it is a grief process. You lose part of your identity, who you are, your lifestyle, your friends, your family, people that you're in contact with on a regular basis. It's what we got up in the morning for, and it's what we knew and what we loved to do. Losing it, I mean, the battle we had when we did lose our jobs, I think it kept us busy, it kept us occupied. We worked together very, very well throughout the 11 stores, which gave us all that sense of unity and strength and everything. And the pickets was still an opportunity to maintain some of those relationships for our work with our work colleagues. But I mean, at the end of our dispute, when when the action came to an end, personally, I was devastated. I think I was more devastated by that because we got nothing. We were treated so badly by the government, by the legal system. We were treated very, very badly. But the film, even though it is raw and emotional and it's a very, very strong impact on what the workers went through, it is a tribute to the workers and what we experienced and the hardships that we went through. And I mean, the fact that we were predominantly women, we were 11 stores, very, very isolated, but throughout every adversity, we all came together and we stayed strong together. And I think that comes across for me personally with this film. And it is a tribute to the workers for what they endured. Um, so I've watched it a couple of times, and I mean, like that. I think each time it gets more emotional for us. I mean, like that. Even when the guards came in and broke up the pickets, I mean, this was in the middle of the night, so we were all isolated in our own homes, watching these live feeds, unable to do anything, and that feeling of helplessness, it still haunts us because we couldn't do anything about it. That if we had the numbers there, maybe it would have changed, it would have made a difference. But because of the circumstances, the isolation from everyone, from all the stores, it was very, very difficult. But like I said, the film, it is a massive tribute to the workers. And for that, I'm very, very grateful for Fergus and Joe.
Do you think things might have been different if COVID hadn't hit?
Um, I think if COVID hadn't hit, the company still had planned on closing. And I mean, there's been evidence uncovered since that indicated that it was still going to close regardless. Um, but the fight would still have been taken up for sure. And that fight could have been very, very different because where we didn't get the support on the pickets that we should have got, we relied very heavily on social media because there was the travel restrictions, there was the isolation, and there was the COVID. So that was our first battle, was against all that. But we still did get support from people passing in the streets and from even people passing in cars and businesses and stuff like that. If if it wasn't COVID, I would imagine that support would have been far, far bigger and more of a response to what we were standing and fighting for. And people would have understood it more because people were battling their own difficulties with COVID. So there wasn't much room in maybe their lives to be looking at things that were going on elsewhere. And I mean, like I said, we did only have the social media platform in order to highlight our strike action. So a lot of people wouldn't have seen that, and a lot of people wouldn't have tuned in and understood it better. But I think from the film, I mean, after we viewed it in UCC in Cork, people came up to me afterwards apologizing to me that they didn't realize what was going on. And that was, I mean, for me, that was kind of like a realization that even though we fought it, on the pickets and on social media, it didn't get out to as many people as what we thought it would have done.
Thing about KPMG as well is they get to keep a nice hefty cut of all that. So that was in their best interest for it to sell it. They're not going to get it
Believe it or
because
not,
you'd be the best.
KPMG are still working on the liquidation process of Debenhams, so they're still getting paid. And I mean, like that, it is going into the millions. So, I mean, it's in their best interest to keep it going as long as they possibly can, because the longer it goes on, the more they're going to get paid. And it is, I mean, like that, it's very hard to, I mean, we were predominantly women, but we weren't stupid. We weren't naive enough to think that, I mean, we weren't looking for anything that we didn't feel we were entitled to and that we didn't earn. I mean, we had sacrificed so much for so many years in order to maintain the operation of all 11 stores, and to generate the profits for the vulture funds and the CEOs and everyone else. But what we were looking for was what we had worked for.
And
And
what you'd been promised, what you had been promised contractually.
yes,
That was there. That was like if you were going to get redundancy, and like if the funds weren't there, fine, the funds weren't there. And then at the end of the day, I'd be interested to know, when everything is wrapped up, are they going to pay the state back for anything the state? Like, you know, the way the state are probably the people that actually paid the check of the redundancy that you did
well,
manage to get.
that's actually very interesting, because I know the Taoiseach kept harping on that it was the state that paid it, but in actual fact that comes from a social insurance fund that the companies pay into while they're operating. So that's a social fund that our redundancy was paid out from. What we were looking for would have coming directly
Yeah.
from the company and the assets of the company, but it's actually the state agencies, the social welfare office, the tax office, they all have to get paid first before any other
Good.
creditors.
I love, I don't want to say it now because it's a bit of a spoiler, but the stock that was managed to stay there, what happened to that at the end?
It was removed.
Yeah, it was all removed, and some other stores then bought it. They bought all the fixtures and fittings, the stock, and the cosmetics. And I mean, even at the time, it was before Christmas, all the cosmetics went into Michael Guiney's. So there was huge interest. I mean, it lasted for a couple of days where they were releasing different products every day. And I mean, there was queues to get in to buy the stock. So it didn't make as much money as what they had thought, but it did generate a lot of money.
And knowing what you know now, what do you think would make a difference? Or
Like that, I think. I mean, what we done, I mean, we were very respectful to each other, and I mean, like that, we put up a strong fight and everything, but the structures aren't there in place to protect workers. When we were picketing, the laws around picketing do not protect the workers, and it's very. I mean, I was brought to the High Court because for an injunction against my part on the picket. And it's not that I done anything wrong, but I just felt that I was doing effective picketing in a nice way. And I mean, like that, there was no issues as such, only that we refused to let the stock out of the stores, so we manned the picket at the gates. Um, but there definitely needs to be a review of the laws with workers' rights and with strike action and the laws around that, to give people more power. I like that we stood in front of trucks. We parked our cars across gates. We had to try to be as creative as possible without crossing the line.
how much did, like, if you see in all that footage, all the guards' bills there, how much did their wages cost? Do you know? And if they had just taken that and put that into a fund and used that to pay it, I'd say at the end of the day, they would have covered it twice
Oh,
over.
definitely.
Yeah,
Because I mean,
security actually cost nearly 9 to 10 million, and all the workers were looking for was 13.5 million euros. So, like the Debenhams group continued to trade for 9 months while the workers were on picket. So in Derry and Belfast and in mainland England, Wales and Scotland, they actually made 142 million in those 9 months in sales. What they did was they took what was the cash cow, the online site, and they brought that across into a UK domain. And so if you bought a blouse in Dublin or you bought a skirt in Cork, those monies went to a UK bank account. But the workers were told originally that that online site would be used for, their redundancy, which wasn't the case. Within 1 month of the strike taking place, the .ie site had been moved to a .co.uk domain. And alongside that, like Debenhams sold their Danish. So what happened here really was that the Irish side and the Danish Debenhams were made co-guarantors in 2019, on the 9th of April 2019, of a 200 million floating charge loan to keep Debenhams alive. And in January 2020, 3 months before the workers got their generic email, the Danish side were released from the guarantor of that loan. So the 200 million is key because in Irish company law, a floating charge can only come into law within 12 months. So on the 9th of April 2020, 12 months to the day that they sign off, they liquidate the company. So a floating charge can only come into play in Irish company law in liquidation process after 12 months. So the debt in Debenhams Ireland goes from 22 million to 300 million. So they have to liquidate the company. So it's a tactical liquidation,
Like it is like, and so they've been kind of planning that and kind of
Oh
screwing them
yeah.
over.
I mean, we actually found out that the workers they weren't even going to get an email. This was going to be announced on Sky News. They would have found out on Sky News. Only Irish directors sent an email at 5 to 12 on the morning of the 9th of April 2020. The press release was ready for midday. It would have been announced on Sky News. That's how they would have found out, but only for a decency of a couple of the Irish directors who sent an email out. They would have found out through Sky News.
This is why this film is so great, because I mean, it's just really kind of highlighted the humanity of that and that cost to it in a really visceral way, where again, like I was shocked at the physicality of the actual protest and what you guys actually had to live through. But I want to ask a little bit about the mechanics of the filmmaking process. So tell me a little bit, actually, if you can, about how you guys got the footage. Was it collected? Was there a call out? Did you have to secure the rights for everything? Like, because there's a lot of coverage there, as well as those lovely interviews.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, it's done in two ways. I mean, it obviously you have the interviews, in-store interviews, but also there was a lot of social media. So I myself and Joe really had to. We basically just trawled the social media. So it wasn't really a call out as such. We just basically went through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, everywhere, just with Debenhams, and put it all on a drive and literally went through it all. Obviously, we also there is RTE and Virgin Media would have done a number of reports, so we would have had to obviously get permission to use their footage, which we did. And but yeah, it's in two streams, if you like. You've got this sort of sit down interviews where the people are talking, but also you have that social media aspect, which gives it that raw feel of that these were a lot of the filming was done by the workers themselves, on cameras and different things like that. And it, as Carol Ann alluded to earlier, see, this strike was in the middle of a COVID, so there was no media attention at all. So their only platform was social media, and so I think with this film also, it's. I mean, we filmed around all the different loading bays, where these workers stood, and they didn't have any toilet facilities. These were in the most this is, back of buildings where trucks arrive to, to bring in stock. So it's just, they're freezing cold as well. I mean, we spent 6 hours down in Cork filming down in Patrick Street, and like there's a wind that it's like a tunnel, and the wind goes through. So I mean, I was saying to Joe, like the director, and I said, like, we've stood here for 6 hours. I'm absolutely freezing. How in God's name could you stand here for 406 days? It's just incredible. And I think, and as I say, it was really, I think also in the film, like it's quite raw, but also in the film, I think we get across well the whole camaraderie and that whole thing of you might have worked, if you work together, you might be on a different floor or a different department. But by the end of this strike, everybody knew everybody's business. They lived with each other. And, I think that's a great thing, that because nowadays in Ireland, you don't get that sense of community. Everybody is rushing, you're going to work or you're dropping kids off or whatever it is. The traffic is crazy. And you don't get that, whereas these people would have had the picket lines went for 6 to 12 hours. So, there was only so much you could talk about the strike. So I'm sure, it seemed to be that they had, conversations about their home life, about, I don't know, hobbies, interests, everything. But I mean, that's the night we had in the Lighthouse Cinema in the Dublin Film Festival, when we released the film on the 4th of March. I mean, it was like being at a football match, because just the atmosphere was just electric. You don't get that at cinemas, but I mean, there was clapping, there was roaring at different pieces, and there was just that excitement. But I think I think it, with regard to filming, it was just that mix of, because of the way it worked out. There was that we had to take a certain amount of social media, as well as the the sit down standard interviews.
And it worked really well. Sorry, Carol, we just cut across you there. Say what you were going to say.
No, it was just on your point about, I mean, with regards to the social media, and I mean, when they started removing the stock, it was very strategic in the way that when they did start to break up the pickets, it was done 1 o'clock in the morning. They closed off streets. There was barriers to close off streets and everything, so nobody could get in, and it could be a very controlled environment for the Gardaí and stuff like that. So it was, I mean, it was very strategically done against workers. And then you had workers that were in their 50s, 60s, that were being lifted up off the pickets, and they didn't want media coverage. Nobody wants media coverage of that.
Yeah.
So hence the reason that the workers did have to do a lot of the filming themselves on the night, just to highlight it. And these were live feeds that all around the country, every day, well, all the shop stewards and all the people involved in the pickets were watching, and it was devastating for us at the time. And it's still a bit surreal, the fact that they got away with it. And the following day, there was no coverage on any media platform in regards to it. So it was very, very strategically done, in a sense.
Well, I hope as well people will see this film, because there's no denying that. And do you want to say again about sort of getting the edits together? And again, like it's kind of there's a fast enough pace to it, because it is quite dramatic. Can you actually tell me a little bit about how the budget for this came around? How did you secure this? Was this something that maybe came in for because there's I mean, it's a very polished piece of film as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose initially we were like toying with the idea of narration, of somebody narrating film, but as the film moves at a very fast pace. So I think it was actually we just started filming down in Tralee in County Kerry, and there was one of the girls there, one of the workers, she was given the job of changing the numbers every day. So she had this sign that she had done 406 days. It was the last one she brought along to the filming. And that's where that came from. And then it was Joe's idea to sort of use that sort of clock, so
Yeah.
it also gives people, and where you are then you know, throughout the film. You know what I mean, because it's sort of date driven and it's chronological. So that was sort of the idea to with regard to that. But as I say, so the way we edit it, when we basically took it in sort of 6 chunks, and obviously started with, you know, I don't want to tell too much, but started with sort of the email and you know and people, a little bit of people's backgrounds.
Yeah, because it has a kind of chapter episodic
Yeah,
feel within it as
yeah,
well. That works really
yeah,
well. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, that's really, that was the idea then, to use that sort of to go through the 406 and break it down into, well, what happened. So you obviously had the, you know, the generic email. You have the 100 days, which was the where I suppose Carol Ann and people from, you know, different parts of the country. Actually, you have to remember that a lot of these workers never met. You know, everything was done through Zoom, or, you know, Zoom or WhatsApp. So, you know, for that 100 days protest, that was probably the first time that workers, you know, came together, you know, because of COVID. So yeah, it's got that, and then obviously you have the you know, they occupy the building, so that's another like chapter, if you like. And then the Kevin Foley talks, you know, where the government actually finally get involved and try and bring this to a head, which fails. And then it's sort of Christmas time. I mean, I remember speaking to one of the women, like, and you know, they actually had their Christmas dinner on the picket line, you know, which is incredible to think. I mean, this was in the middle where, you know, people were dying from a disease as well. This was all going on in the background, you know, while this strike was going on. So, you know, um, so we sort of, and then obviously it's like, it's a build up to what happens on the night of the, you know, the situation where, you know, the injunction comes in then, and then it's a crime to picket, you know, that, you know, these people shouldn't be, you know, it's literally, you know, we can arrest you if you picket here, or you block a truck, or you stand in front of a truck, you know. So so it's sort of that lead up to how the Gardaí smashed, or the state, if you want. Well, it wasn't even Gardaí; it was actually the riot squad that came in here for grandmothers and mothers. So it's really that build up to how that the strike was smashed. You know, is the way we worked it, but we broke it into sort of 6 chapters, and then I think with the ending, which you mentioned earlier, I think it's really that, you know, yeah, sadly, yes, these people didn't get what they deserved. They didn't get their agreed redundancy. But I think one of the things that they would like to see is that, and as a number of them said, is it's really for their children or grandchildren, and that they don't have to go through this again. You know, we have a Duffy Cal report sitting on a minister's desk, you know, gathering dust for the last 7 years since Cleary's. And I mean, one of the proposals, and I think John Collins mentions it, the TD in the film, is that, you know, if that was law today, there would be a 30-day sort of cooling off period for liquidations in these cases. And people can sit down and say, well, what's happening here? Or, you know, rather than, you know, people, you know, and obviously the Debenhams workers were the first group in Ireland to be basically sacked by email. You know, we now have Twitter workers. The same thing happened to them. So like it's an issue, and it's not, I suppose, being, you know, we do have I think what these workers wanted was that they had, there is now a Debenhams bill going through the Dáil. It's at stage 3, and I suppose that is, they didn't get what they deserved. And I mean, sadly, you know, the companies involved here, the lenders who took over Debenhams, which were 3 American hedge funds, Bank of Ireland and Barclays Bank, they walked away with 315 million sterling, you know, and these people didn't get a penny. All they got was a training fund. As one woman said to me, I'm 64 years of age. I'm due to retire in 2 years' time. Do they want me to retrain as a brain surgeon? You know, what do they want me to do? You know, so I think, you know, I think what these people want now is a legislation that this never happens to their children or their grandchildren, you know. And I think that, but as I say, we had to, the way we had to edit this film, we did it chronologically, and we had to, people, if you didn't do it the way we did it, you might get lost in the film a little bit, because there's so much. As you said earlier, 406 days. It's a long time. Like it's more than a year. It's actually, I think it's the longest strike in Irish industrial relations history, and obviously the first led by grandmothers and mothers So I think the way we sort of put it into chapters and broke it down, and sort of the way what we did was we brought in the shop stewards as we were making the film. So we would sort of do from, say, the first 50 minutes, and we showed them the first 50 minutes, so that we hadn't, they were happy with it. We hadn't left anything out. We didn't miss anything, that sort of thing. So that's the way we did it. But I think that the idea of and people will see it in the film, the way it moves from sort of 001, which is the first day, right up to 406 days. So you can follow and see what happens,
And
throughout the strike.
And you were saying you were sort of editing as you're going along, because again, it is so chronological. It's not something that you can have to go back and find the story. The story is kind of already there, and you're just rejigging it to the best kind of format. But tell me a little bit then about, like kind of getting the sound, because again, it's very sort of powerful. There's like, it's very emotive as well. And I think the sound definitely lends itself to that, and how it's all mixed in. And the pacing is really nice. That's what I was saying, that there's and even securing the rights to things like RT, I presume there's a bit of funds behind it. I was like, how did you guys raise that? Was that development funding? Did you guys get a production grant to do the end bit, or was that all self?
No, we unfortunately I suppose we went here, there, and I mean, we went to unions, we went to art links groups, to county councils, we went everywhere to raise the monies for it. So I suppose it was my first film to be involved in, so I've learned a huge amount from it, and how sort of film works. But yeah, no, we sort of went around the houses, and just goodwill of private donations and different things like that. But we see, I suppose, like the problem we had was that we had to start immediately. We had to, I met Joe last February, and if we waited another year, or if we had waited and applied to different funding streams and all that sort of stuff, we wouldn't have been able to make it, because the buildings would have been sold, which they are now. And it's also, it wouldn't be as raw in people's heads. Like literally, these people had just finished this strike, so we were able to sit down with them immediately. So, with regard to the sound, I mean, we just found that sort of music, off, a generic database that you can use. And I think also we had the idea of, it's like a heartbeat, because it's raw, and that's what we wanted. It sort of reminds me a bit, I'm not sure if you know the Leia ad, where the heartbeat's gone. So that's the idea that we sort of came up with. So it's like, because what we didn't want with this film is that we lose people, so we had to keep it moving fast. And I think the sound and the music and the the way that even the TikTok and the clock, that people probably don't know what I'm talking about, but in the film, it sort of all lends itself to it. As I say, we did have, at the start of the project, we even had one of the workers in, and we were thinking maybe you could narrate, but it was just too slow paced. We had to,
Oh no, and it's much more visceral.
It's a crescendo.
Yeah.
It's like an opera. The film is like an opera, and then your end is just that build up to the riot scene, and that's the in Henry Street, and to what happened, to how the strike is smashed in Dublin and Cork, Dublin, Waterford, and Limerick, and obviously Limerick is, I think, one of the most powerful parts of the film is in Limerick, where it's the only store that they did, and obviously Patrick Street, which they didn't touch.
Rebels County.
But I mean, there's a lovely scene where they sing Limerick, You're a Lady, which is lovely, because and you can see that pride. I mean, it's 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and there's people out in their pajamas that have come down to support the workers and everything. It's just incredible. But I mean, I think the great thing about it is, like in making this film, it was like meeting an extended family. We started at 6:30 last March, in an empty Henry Street. And, we went all around the country. We met, people workers down in Waterford, Limerick, Cork, Tralee. I mean, so and everybody had a story. I even met this. I mean, it's not in the film, but I met this lady. There was a lady down in Waterford, and the Waterford loading bay looks onto a nursing home. Okay, and there was I think she was in her 90s or about 90 years of age, and her window looked out onto the Waterford loading bay. The Debenhams loading bay in Waterford, and she was their lookout. She suffered with insomnia. No word of a lie. She suffered with insomnia, and she was passing one day, and she said to the shop steward, she explained the story to the shop steward, and she said, "Look, I don't sleep well at night. If you give me your number, I'll keep an eye out for trucks coming," because the workers had a red alert. So, like, these trucks, like the KPMG trucks, or the company they were using, they didn't come between 9 to 5. They came at 2 o'clock in the morning, or 3 o'clock in the morning, or 4 o'clock in the morning. So this lady was their lookout, which is an incredible story, But that's just, everybody had a story, everybody we met.
And that's such a brilliant story of community resistance and the power in, because there's so much systemic injustice, and that's very evident. But I think that's something that is very inspiring, because I think you would maybe think twice if they knew the outcome. I'm sure you would be like, oh my God, if I had known that, he didn't do it. But I wonder if you were, planning on doing something similar, and you were an executive at that top end going, oh, we just pay them, it'd be so much cheaper in the long run if we just pay them the next time. There's the sunken cost fallacy of they've already lost the money, so they've fought this one. But I wonder, is it just, will the battle be subdued a little bit? Because if you think of all the legal fees, all the trucking rental fees that they had to pay, that they had to go back empty handed, is it just going to be a case of it's not worth it? It's not worth the fight, and that's the battle.
I think for KPMG, it is worth the fight, because they're still fighting against the workers. We do have cases in the WRC that didn't get heard until last October, and now we're almost into May, and we still haven't heard anything from the hearings, and we still didn't get a judgment, because KPMG are still battling to prevent us from getting any kind of even compensation for the way that our notice was given, and the fact that they broke some laws and stuff like that. So KPMG, their pockets are very, very deep, and what they can do to prevent us from getting anything, they're taking that, and they're doing that. So I don't think I've ever heard of cases going to the WRC and taking this length of time. It's coming up on it'll be 3 years. It was 3 years in March since we were made redundant. And it's been dealt with in the WRC since last October. So, that's what, 7 months? And we still haven't had a result from it. And so KPMG have very, very deep pockets. And again, it's the hierarchy, and it's the power that they have over the workers. And it's making a point.
Yeah, you guys put up one hell of a fight, though. That was some putting the foot down. And I think, again, this film does celebrate that fighting spirit, because I do think so many times there's just, it hasn't even turned out, there's so many times people have just sort of given in, and it is ye, it's the likes of ye, it's like Vicky Phelan, when that system rears its head and goes, be silent, just go along with it. At the very least, that level of resistance just gives, I think, people hope as well, that, but I'd say it must have been exhausting. I'd say it was just purely exhausting.
It was at times, especially when there wasn't, again, KPMG refused to come around the table for any negotiations or talks or anything like that. So there was time lapses where there was nothing happening, and it was a case of, okay, if there's nothing happening, we're going to be here indefinitely. And it's just trying to maybe push for negotiations to transpire, to get somewhere, to bring it to a close. I mean, when we started out, we never, ever imagined that we would be there for 406 days. I mean, we started benchmarking our strike action against the Vita Cortex workers. And when we surpassed their period of time of protesting, I mean, it was kind of, we were into uncharted territories then. But again, I mean, coming up to Christmas, it was a case of, well, we don't want to be having our Christmas dinner on the picket lines, but that's exactly what did happen. And I mean, going into the new year, again, COVID was very, very prevalent after Christmas of that year, and there was a lot of fear. So nobody wanted it to continue indefinitely. But at the same time, I mean, people were still determined to stand up and fight and to stay strong together. So, I mean, there was an awful lot of resilience there, but we believed in what we were fighting for was right, and it was right not just for ourselves, but for all of workers' rights. Yeah. So I think it was just the strength in that knowledge that gave us the determination to carry forward with it.
And I think the continuation of that is to, like, I would say, see it, support the film. Definitely, it's worth a watch. Thank you both so much for chatting with us. But I would say that it's like, it is an inspiration, and I would definitely recommend everyone to go out and see it, because I think it's eye-opening. It's just really shocking, and it's really, really surprisingly powerful, because you're like, again, we're at the precipice of another recession. So it's like, if it can be ye, it can be any of us. So I think it's as much of a film as it is a call to action. So yeah, so thank you both so much. If there's anything that you guys want to add, or
yeah, I suppose the film comes out in cinemas on the 26th of May. This will be, we're actually also bringing the film into Dáil Éireann on the 10th of May. So that should be interesting.
Well, I'd like to be a fly on that wall. So thanks so much for chatting with us. That's brilliant. Cheers.
No problem.
Gemma,
that's
thanks
great.
so much.
Great film, guys. Good luck anyway. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Bye.
Take care.